Every gardener who grows late-season crops eventually discovers one truth: November is unforgiving. You can have perfect soil, healthy seedlings, and a flawless planting schedule, yet one cold snap or one dry, chilly wind can undo weeks of preparation. And this is exactly where a small, often overlooked trick makes all the difference. A simple thin layer of mulch, applied immediately after planting your November crops, can be the reason your plants thrive instead of struggle. It not only guards them through temperature swings, but also helps them establish strong roots before the deep cold sets in. Today I want to walk you through this technique in detail, because it is one of the simplest and most powerful late-season protections a gardener can use. Why mulch matters more in November than any other month. Mulching is something gardeners associate with spring or summer, usually for moisture control or weed suppression. But November mulching is different. At this point in the year, you're not fighting heat or weeds. You're fighting the instability of shifting temperatures. The soil hasn't fully cooled yet, but nighttime lows can drop hard and fast. This creates sharp fluctuations between warm afternoons and cold evenings. Plants setting new roots are extremely sensitive to these swings. A thin mulch layer works as a buffer. It keeps the soil from losing heat too quickly at night while also preventing sudden warming during the day. This stability allows young crops like garlic, winter onions, hardy lettuces, brassicas, root vegetables, and overwintering herbs to focus their energy on expanding root systems instead of constantly adjusting to stress. Garlic, winter onions, hardy lettuces, brassicas, root vegetables, overwintering herbs. When roots stay active and protected, plants enter winter stronger and bounce back in spring with more vigor. Why the layer must be thin and not heavy? A mistake many gardeners make when mulching late-season beds is applying too much. A thick mulch layer in November can trap too much moisture, stay too cool, or create conditions for fungal growth. Newly planted crops need access to oxygen and moderate warmth. The goal here is not insulation, it's moderation. Your target depth should be 1/2 inch to 1 inch, no deeper. This is enough to keep soil temperatures steady without smothering young plants. Striking this balance is what makes the November mulch method so effective. If you're planting garlic, for example, a 1/2 inch mulch keeps the soil just warm enough for roots to establish, while still allowing the top layer to cool naturally as winter progresses. For hardy greens like spinach, this thin layer prevents frost from lifting the soil and disturbing young roots. So, which materials actually work best for November mulching? Well, not all mulches work in quite the same way. For late-season planting, you'll want materials that are light, breathable, and, quick to break down. They really shouldn't mat together or hold on to heavy moisture. Applying mulch at this time of year is honestly all about choosing the right material and using it properly. Spread your chosen mulch in a layer about 2 to 3 inches thick, making sure it covers the soil evenly but doesn't pile up against the stems of your plants. This helps keep the soil insulated while still allowing air and water to move through. Remember, the goal is to protect your garden without creating problems like rot or mold. The best November mulches include shredded leaves, straw pine needles, cocoa hulls, dried grass clippings, or even crumbled, partially finished compost. If you're using leaves, just make sure you shred them. Whole leaves can form a dense wet sheet that honestly might suffocate the soil. Straw is an excellent option because it traps pockets of air while letting moisture evaporate naturally. If you happen to have compost that's still in the last stages of breaking down, a very thin layer can work beautifully. It delivers both protection and a gentle nutrient release throughout the early stages of growth. How to apply the November mulch layer properly? There's only one key rule: Mulch immediately after planting. Don't wait a day or two. The moment seeds or transplants are in the ground, the soil surface is exposed and vulnerable to temperature swings. You want to lock in the soil's natural warmth while it's still holding the midday heat. Begin by watering the bed lightly. November moisture helps settle the soil and ensures roots have good contact. Once the soil surface is moist, not soggy, spread your thin mulch layer evenly across the bed. All right, let's talk about some specific application techniques. It's important to know exactly how to apply mulch for the best results, So take your time to spread the mulch evenly, making sure not to pile it up against the stems of your plants. This helps prevent rot and encourages healthy growth. And remember to break up any large clumps as you go, so the mulch covers the soil nicely without smothering anything. You should still see small openings of soil between pieces of mulch. If you can't see any soil at all, the layer is too thick. For crops planted in rows, such as onions or garlic, apply mulch between rows, then gently brush a thin amount over the tops. For greens or herbs planted in blocks, simply dust the entire bed evenly. Why this method improves root strength and spring growth. When soil temperature stays stable, roots continue to grow deep and wide instead of clustering near the surface. That extra root establishment before winter gives plants a massive head start when temperatures warm again. Well, mulching really does offer a host of benefits beyond just protecting your plants. It helps retain moisture, suppresses weeds, and even improves soil structure over time. And, don't be afraid to experiment with different organic mulches to find what works best in your own garden. Remember to keep mulch a little bit away from the base of stems to prevent rot, and top up the layer as it breaks down. With a bit of care, your garden will be healthier and more resilient year after year. Garlic, for example, will form deeper, stronger root systems that support large, healthy bulbs. Overwintered onions will anchor themselves firmly and resist frost heaving. Hardy greens will develop a dense root network that allows them to survive cold spells without yellowing or wilting. Even perennial herbs benefit, particularly thyme, sage, and chives, which appreciate the gentle protection. By late winter and early spring, crops treated with this November mulch method are noticeably stronger, more resilient, and, quicker to take off once growth resumes. How mulch prevents cold shock and sudden dehydration. Late autumn winds can be surprisingly drying. When young crops are exposed to cold, dry air, the soil surface loses moisture rapidly, sometimes faster than roots can replenish it. A thin mulch layer reduces this evaporative stress. Even a half-inch is enough to prevent the topsoil from drying out excessively. Cold shock is another issue. Sudden drops below freezing can cause soil contraction that disrupts tender new roots. Mulch slows the rate of cooling and helps reduce those micro-movements that can loosen soil around seedlings. Now, let's talk a bit about mulch blends and wrap things up. Mixing different types of mulch can actually give you the best of both worlds. Like, you get the moisture retention from one and the slow nutrient release from another. It's worth experimenting with combinations that suit your garden's needs. And well, remember, the right mulch not only protects your plants, but also improves the overall health of your soil over time. So don't be afraid to try out a few options and see what works best for you and your garden. Here's a November mulch trick that, honestly, many gardeners tend to overlook. Now, one additional step that can make this technique even more effective is, well, using a mulch blend. By combining two lightweight materials, like shredded leaves mixed with straw or maybe even pine needles, you create a balance between warmth, airflow, and moisture regulation. For example, A 50-50 blend of shredded leaves and straw makes an excellent November mulch for garlic and greens because it doesn't compact and, it breaks down evenly. Just a few final thoughts here. A simple, thin mulch layer might seem, a bit insignificant, but it's actually one of the most effective ways to support your November crops. It reduces stress, stabilizes temperature, protects roots, and really sets your plants up for vigorous growth once spring returns. It's also, honestly, one of the most economical and low-effort techniques you can use during the late season. If you found this guide helpful and want more late-season gardening wisdom, be sure to subscribe to Gentle Herb Gardening and, share this video with someone who's planting fall crops this year. Your support helps this community grow and reach more gardeners who need reliable, practical help.